Delighted to be here. My agenda is to be as much of a resource for you folks as I can be for the time that we have. It's always the most fun when I feel most used. So very happy to run me through the grinder and take advantage of what I might be able to share with you. Let me just start out by saying you all get things done. I was listening to the radio this morning. What, your stock price in the last, excuse me, this is about as cool as it gets in terms of getting things done. So why are you in here? Maybe it's the stress of opportunity. Do you know Wall Street was more stressed out in the 90s than it was after the recession? Because they were afraid the competition might be getting there at 3 o'clock in the morning instead of 4, so they just stayed. In a strange way, when you're in crisis, you get to relax because you don't have to think. That's really, I think, what GTD, the nerve that it hit, is what is the, as someone very actually elegantly called it, knowledge work athletics. What is the thinking that we need to do? Now, we all do it. We all sort of do it intuitively. What I've done is bring to more conscious awareness what the thinking process is that facilitates our ability to get things done. Quite simply, you need to know what done means and what doing looks like. But that is not in a Gmail. Any of you ever opened any one of your emails and it suddenly, by opening it and starting to read it, it suddenly goes ding, 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 ding. By opening and reading and accepting this email, here is the outcome you have now committed to about this. And here is the very next action step you must take to move toward closure to keep that commitment. Any of you get emails like that? Be tough enough, even if that was all clear, you got a lot. But no, each one of those, inside of all of that, we all have to make those decisions. That's the thinking process that has to go on to determine meaning. A lot of what GTD was about was, wait a minute, what is it that we really need to clarify out there in order to be able to surf on top of this game instead of feel buried by it? So if you're like me, I am a fellow student, by the way. Every single thing I'm going to share with you today, I fall off the wagon regularly and fast. By the way, it's very easy to fall off the GTD wagon, for those of you who are familiar with this. It's very easy to get back on. It's very easy to get out of control. Very easy to get back on, as long as you know how to do that. So a lot of what I did was just make more conscious the process of how we get back on in case you get off. So if you're on, this will just be a reminder about how you got there. A lot of people get on but don't know how they got there. They go, wow, I'm on. What happened? Then they fall off and they go, oh, damn, what happened? As opposed to understanding, here's why I'm on, here's what I did that created that, that's actually a duplicatable event once you figure that out. So that's kind of what I did, was figure that out. And a lot of this is kind of after the fact. I'm really a behavioralist. I didn't start with theory and then try to make that work. I started with what works toward making things happen easier, faster, whatever. And then kind of backed up and said, no, wait a minute, what's the principle that lies behind that? For instance, have any of you in here sort of felt your back up against the wall and felt yourself sort of confused and a bit overwhelmed, and you sat down and you made a list and you felt a little bit better? Anybody ever do that? If you'd figured out why that works, you'd never keep anything in your head the rest of your life. Just most people have to feel really bad before they do things that make them feel a little bit better. But if you actually figured out why that works, you'd realize your brain is not for holding commitments. It doesn't function very well that way. And that's why, writing it down, nothing changed out here, but something changed about how you're engaged with that by distributed cognition, as the scientists now call that. I had a psychologist go through one of my seminars. She said, gee, David, you know what this is? I said, what is that? She said, distributed cognition. I went, you mean write it down? She said, well, that's another way to say it. Okay. Well, we laugh, but you've only seen the tip of the iceberg in terms of people understanding the value of getting things out of the psyche to be able to then negotiate with it in a much more objective, elevated level than to be in it. And I think we're still at the beginning of sort of testing out, exploring, and researching what those tools are that facilitate us freeing ourselves up for what the brain is really designed to do, which is intuitive, your intuition, your intelligence. No system can do that. Now, you engineers are going to say, I want to find a better way to automate GTD. So, fabulous. I don't care how much of an AI expert you are, how much of a macro freak in your software you are, you're not going to write a program that when you run it, it says, call Fred. You might, but you're going to go, no, I'd rather have a beer. So systems can't tell you anything to do. They can, but you're not going to be able to trust it to tell you what to do. What a system can do is move you from hope to trust in those choices. And that's really what GTD was. That was the promise of what this was all about. Basically, as Renee, and thanks, Renee, for the introduction, Renee sort of gave you, she said, David, what do you want to talk about? I said, well, here's kind of my topic du jour. First of all, I'd like to frame GTD as the martial art it really is. It's the martial art of work and life, essentially, and the logic of that. So I'm going to walk you through the logic about why this stuff works when you work it. And then, ultimately, why it solves the two aspects, or it facilitates your ability to enhance the two aspects of essentially managing yourself. Control and perspective, by the way. Those are the two. We'll talk about those, the matrix. When you overlay those against each other, you'll see that, and they need very different things to do. There are different things to do that get you in control and different things to do that give you perspective. They're not the same animal. Talk about why the models that I sort of synthesized and pulled together facilitate control and perspective. And as you're going to see, folks, come on, and some of you who've intersected, how many of you have intersected with GTD to some degree? You've either read the book or been to a seminar or something like that. Okay. By the way, if you haven't, that's not a prerequisite. If you have, this will be a reminder of what you probably saw but didn't quite see yet. I need reminders of this regularly. It seems to be this onion I can keep peeling deeper and deeper, and we'll see more aspects of it. But I'll share with you the two very simple models that we facilitate. Now, each one of those, you can drill into it in quite a bit of sophistication and detail. So happy to range further into that detail if we have the time to do that. And I certainly, I don't want to spend too much time just sort of talking at you. I do want to open it up and dialogue with you, because trust me, there are as many different applications and implications of this material as there are people sitting in this room. GTD, a lot of people have called this life-changing in terms of truly how they changed, how they just dealt with getting up in the morning and dealing with work and life. And a lot of people just like the tips and tricks. Usually the younger you are, the more you're interested in the tips or tricks. Life changing my life, fine. Come on, I'm too busy to be worried about improving my life. But as you kind of say, yeah, but now as you sort of get up and start to have kids and want to play golf and want to do some other things, oftentimes, wait a minute, there is a whole different approach here that can facilitate my ability to keep a lot more plates spinning at a lot more sophisticated level without upping the stress level. And when that starts to be of importance to you, that's where the heat's, that's where you start to see the value of these models. For instance, I doubt if many of you need to understand gravity or automobiles any better than you currently do. You can probably make it through the rest of your life real cool without understanding those gravity or cars any better than you do, unless you're hired as a formula racer. Then you damn well better understand cars and gravity better than the average bear. So the same is true with work. You don't need to understand the martial art of work if the heat ain't on. But if you jump yourself into or throw yourself into places and opportunities that will challenge you to the edge, that's when the elegance of the martial art and the moves and understanding that and seeing how they work and making more conscious can make a big difference. That's what we've seen with these models. And I'll talk a little bit about the GTD phenomenon. I'm as much bemused by it as many other people are. I just said at some point, it took me 25 years to figure out what I'd figured out. Because I thought everybody had figured this out before me. I was trying to catch up with the rest of the world that I thought had already done this. Then one day I looked around and went, nobody else has done this. What happened? So my game was just to sort of write the book, create a website, throw this out there, put my spin on this, and see who saluted. I was willing to take this as small as it wanted to be or as big as the world wanted it. Well, the world keeps saying, gee, this is cool, we want more. So now I figured I was going to take the next 25 years to figure out how to educate the world, or at least give them the tools to facilitate the implementation of this. And I don't consider myself really an expert at that yet at all. So you can help us, and you are, by the way. By the way, I understand the purpose of this company is basically to provide, to create, essentially make information accessible to everybody on the planet, right? All the information that there is. So the information overload people are in deep trouble, right? And people say information overload, what about information? It's not information overload. If information overload was the issue, you'd walk into a library and die, right? I mean, first time you surf the web, you just blow up. Actually, the first time you walk through nature, you'd blow up. That's why nature is so relaxing, is because of the infinite variety of information that it feeds your brain. Actually, you go weird when you get in a room with no information. It's called sensory deprivation. So the truth is, your brain actually relaxes with the more horizons that it can range in, that will map to the sophistication of whatever that computer is in there. Interestingly enough. But it's not information overload, it's potential meaning overload. Potential meaning. Each one of those emails you're getting has potentially a snake or a berry or something inside it, but it's not evident when you first see that email. That's the problem. So you start to add all the potential meaning. What if you walked into nature and anything could eat you, bite you? You know, it's like, God, that would be like, I'm not going out there. So let's talk about the martial art. I want to give you an idea of the martial art. And I did have a background in karate, so it actually was interesting to find the analogy. It seemed to hold very well with work. Work is an art. I'll be bold enough to tell you GTD described the art of work. Most people just work. They don't realize what the art of that work process is. By the way, I use work in a very universal sense. Anything you want to get done that ain't done yet, that's work. You know, so buy a company or buy a dog. They're both work. Trust me. So work's not a pejorative to me. I also don't even have a distinction between life and work. You know, I'll talk about that too. That's where this is going, is that's going to dissolve if it hasn't already, in terms of you. But the martial art, martial deals with surprise. Martial deals with surprise. I mean, not that the other art forms, you're not also dealing with surprise in some interesting way, but martial says you could be walking down a dark alley and 4 people jump you don't expect. So your training in the martial art will then reflect how good you are with surprise and allocation of energy and surprise. As for my experience, a lot of your competitive edge is your ability to deal with surprise, personally and organizationally. The organizations that can't deal with the stuff that wasn't expected are not around or look very different than they did before. So it is a martial art. Now, there is an image in the martial arts that I use, I refer to a good bit, mind like water. Grasshopper, mind like water. What does that mean? Well, throw something into a pond. How does the water respond to input? Totally appropriate. You throw in a pebble, it does pebble response. Real simple. Back to calm and balance again, ready for the next input, right? Throw in a boulder, what does it do? Boulderness. It doesn't do pebbleness, it does boulderness perfectly. Back to calm and balanced again, ready for the next input. The water's not confused to how to deal with stuff. Also, the water's not tensing up before the rock hits it. It's not going, oh damn, here comes a rock. It just goes, rock. What does that have to do with anything? Well, I don't know if you're aware of it, but the power in a karate punch comes from speed, not muscle. But if you're distracted, hung up, and not fully present and available, you are not totally relaxed. You're not totally relaxed, you lose speed. So a simple definition, if you will, about mind like water, and see if you can translate this into your professional world or just into your world. Perfectly appropriate response to and engagement with whatever's present. But let me ask you, and you don't need to raise your hand, just internally answer this question. Have you ever taken one meeting to the next? You ever taken home to work, work to home? It's probably because you then are not fully available to that new thing with your full resources. There's some part of you that's, you know, if I could see psychically, I can't, but if I could, most people would look like Pigpen. You know, the cartoon character with this cloud of stuff spinning around them. You know, that's been going on that is potentially clouding their ability to see, their ability to respond to the next thing, new thing, appropriately, with all their resources at hand. And I will suggest that your ability to generate power, whatever that means to you, but essentially your ability to be effective in any way, shape, or form has an awful lot to do with your ability to concentrate. It's just physics. You concentrate electricity, it gets more powerful. You concentrate. So there's a sense of concentration. However, your ability to concentrate is directly proportional to your ability to eliminate distraction. Any of you ever been distracted, by the way? Yeah. What did that do to your productivity, by the way? Now, who distracts you more than anybody? Oh, come on, you ever been in a room? Yeah, they're going, he, her. Oh, come on. Any of you ever been in a room by yourself and got distracted? Who did that? Who did that? What? Who turned on solitaire to this computer? Who did that? Got to finish. Right. However, where do your distractions come from? Sure, a loud noise could distract you, but I guarantee you if you were trying to save a baby under a car, you wouldn't hear that noise. What is it that distracts you? Well, from my experience, this may not be the totality of it, but the vast majority of distraction seems to come from mismanaged commitments. Mismanaged commitments. By the way, I'm just curious, how many of you, since you've been sitting here this morning, have had your mind go somewhere that had nothing to do with what was going on in here? Raise your hand. Now, if where you went in your mind was just grazing out of fun, I'm just looking around, imagine that cool. Or if where you went was doing creative developmental thinking down track your brain has never been before that was maturing your thought process and adding value to life and work, I go, wow, that's a cool place for your mind to go. Don't pay any attention to me, stay there. How many of you would say, though, that where your mind went was something you need to do, you need to handle, you need to fix, take care of, see about, do something with? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Why did that pop into your head? By the way, did any of you make significant progress on it while you were sitting here? Could be. Possible. What did most of you do? Oh, you worried. Well, how effective of you. What a high performer. Let's go there. Waste time. Make no progress whatsoever. Just add a few more toxins into your bloodstream from the stress room that probably threw you into. You go there in your head. The partner says, I should be out there doing that. Another part of you says, but I'm stuck in here with this jerk. I hope he's good. Conflict, inner conflict, unresolved, still there. Where most of you didn't go in your mind was, where am I going to be a week from Friday at 3:15? Why? Because you trust that system. And the only reason the other stuff popped in is because you don't trust that system. The problem is, you gave that system, all of that other stuff, your mind the job of managing all of that. And it's a fabulous servant. But it's about 7 years old emotionally. Don't forget, we my God. And it wakes you up at 3 o'clock in the morning, beating you bloody about something you can't do spit about while you're lying there. Have any of you yet to discover your mind doesn't have one? If your brain had a brain, it would only remind you of things when you could do something about them. Oh, come on, let's check this one out. Honestly, how many of you somewhere out there in life, somewhere, have got at least one flashlight right now with dead batteries in it? Raise your hand. Tell me where and when your mind tends to remind you need batteries. When it's dark. This is not smart. If your brain had any innate intelligence whatsoever, it would not bother you about batteries at dead ones. Where would it bother you about batteries? When you pass the right size live ones, and hey, David, you need 2 AA's. They're on the shelf. Whoa, thank you very much. Look, if my mind had a mind, I don't need a system. How many of you woke up, since you woke up this morning until now, have thought of something you needed to do you still have not done? Raise your hand. How many have had that thought more than once? Excuse me. Aren't you folks busy? What makes you think you have the luxury to sit there having thoughts about things and make absolutely no progress on it? I'm sorry, folks. Once you're introduced to GTD, no excuse to ever have a thought twice. Unless you like the thought. But guess what, folks? Your mind does a crappy job, but it can't give it up until it absolutely knows there's a better system. And you can fool me. You can't fool yourself. It absolutely knows whether you're going to look at the right place and that you have the right stuff in the place you'll look. And if it doesn't trust that's true, it's still got it. Can't let it go. Cannot let it go. The problem is your mind, that part of your mind that's hanging onto this stuff, it's that place we call psychic RAM. You know, it's that short-term memory spot, which the study in 1959 showed how much you could hold, data you could hold in there and still function with that appropriately. About 7 things, plus or minus 2. If you're really good, you can handle 9. But as soon as you try to keep track of a 10th one, something just got screwed. It doesn't do that very well. So the point is, it can't let go of the job, and it's still now trying to do all that, and it can't let it go. It can't, and it has no sense of past or future in there. That's the weird part of it. If you really catch that, that means as soon as you give your two things to do that you can't finish when you think of them, and you're using your brain for your system, you created instant failure and stress because you can't do them both at the same time, or there's a part of you psychologically that's trying to. Now, this is a working hypothesis. I just would challenge you to go prove this right or wrong yourself to see if that works. And what happens is there's usually an inverse proportion between the amount something is on your mind and the amount it's getting done. So you can pretty much bet that if something's bugging you, it's hung up and you're the bottleneck. Because the reason it's going to be bugging you is usually because there's decisions about what that thing specifically means to you and what you need to do about it that you haven't made yet. Or even if you've made those decisions, you haven't parked the answers to that question in some trusted place you think you'll look at the right time and place. Because those are the critical things to do to get it off your mind. By the way, you don't have to like your life to get it off your mind. You don't have to like where you're going to be a week from Friday at 3:15 to get that off your mind. You folks understand? The only reason it's on your mind is because it's trying to be your system. It just doesn't do it very well. And the strange thing about this is if you don't, it's actually not strange, it's actually pretty common sense when you think about it. If you don't give appropriate attention to what has your attention, it'll start to take more of your attention than it deserves. So you better start to pay attention to where your mind is going. There's a message inside of that. And if you're not dealing with it, it keeps going there, and it keeps adding fuel to the fire in terms of stress. If you don't handle that. That's one of the reasons that the old models haven't worked is because they didn't start with that reality. They tried to start with some reality that didn't map to what was really going on inside of your psyche. And that's where I started. Now, if you really want to get things off your mind, and by the way, it's possible to be buried and have nothing on your mind. Well, I'm modeling that for you. Maybe that's evident. There isn't much going on up here. Well, this is going on, not that. Could it be? Yeah, I'm buried, got tons of stuff. Important, big things. I mean, you're lovely folks, but you're still one small operational detail in my life. I'm an extra in your play, too. But you wouldn't want my mind going where yours are in here. So, in order to get things off your mind, you don't do it by stacking it up, meditating about it, or drinking about it. I mean, those have other purposes. But if you really want to clear your head, you need to make sure you have captured, clarified, and organized all of your commitments at every horizon you've made those commitments. And you also have to trust that you will engage consciously with those commitments at the appropriate time and place. That's simple. You want nothing on your mind? Make sure you've grabbed it, decided what it means, organized the results of that decision into a trusted place you know, absolutely know you'll see at the right time. Then your mind can let it go, and not until then. But it's possible to do. You've all done it with your calendars. And from my experience, your ability to refocus rapidly on the right things at the right horizon at the right time is the master key, the master technique of knowledge work athletics. As you get more sophisticated and take on more ambiguous, strange, and more plates spinning in the air, your ability to know, 3:15, what's the thing I need to focus on at what level right now? And to be able to shift that in an absolute moment's notice and have ability to manage that game, I think is the master key here. And since perspective is your slipperiest and it's the most valuable commodity you have, your life could be just in the worst dire straits by anybody else looking in, and you can still be on with the appropriate perspective. And your life can look fabulous, and you want to take your life if you have inappropriate perspective. So your point of view, your viewing point, your attitude, your altitude, those things are just so critical in terms of you being on. So anything that can help, anything that helps do that is going to help. Any of you ever lose perspective out there, by the way? Yeah, so anything that can get you back on. Wait a minute, now what happened and where am I? And we all do this. You wouldn't be sitting here if you didn't. Again, I'm just going to make it more conscious. Therefore, The two things that seem to be the most critical to manage are we need control, which means we consciously need to be able to feel like we're engaged in some intentional way and aware of all the options that that engagement could include. A good example is before you go on a vacation. You know when most people feel best about their job, from my experience? Well, not here, because you folks feel great about your job all the time. I know. I just walked around. It looks fabulous. This is the place to work, right? But from my experience in all those other companies, when most people feel best about their job, a week before their holiday. But it's not about their holiday. They think it is. What are you folks doing a week before you go on holiday? Cleaning up, clarifying, grabbing, organizing, and then renegotiating all your agreements with yourself and everybody else. I just suggest you do it weekly, not yearly. But everybody's got a reference point about what it's like to get that kind of control. Okay, they're going to feed the cats, and the sprinkler system's going to go, and then then the clients go. There's probably 3 calls, but I've got my people set up that can handle all that. Okay, that's what I mean by sort of get the whole environment, all the different aspects of it. That's a control piece. Perspective says, should you be taking the vacation, or what are you using the vacation for? And that means that I'm clear about priorities and directionality. In other words, there's some vertical alignment in terms of what I'm doing. These are two actually very different events. Most people have tried to blend them together. That's why it didn't work too well. You can look at it this way. I mean, my old consulting days, obviously there's a 2x2 matrix sitting in my DNA. So let's matrix control and perspective, okay? They're actually different dynamics. On the bottom left quadrant, no control, no perspective. Who or what's that? Well, that's basically in reactive mode, driven by latest and loudest, right? Any of you ever find yourself there? If you're not there at least 6 times a day, you're stale. Oh, come on. Any of you ever leave a big meeting that just generated 14 billion cool, wicked, cool, and fabulous things to do, and just blew the hell out of how you're going to spend the rest of your day? That's what I'm talking about. Now I go back, whoa. I've got to now regroup. But it's out of, okay, now I'm in reactive mode right now. I need to move some other direction. Now, bottom right, high control, no perspective. Who or what's that? That's your basic micromanager. Any of you ever avoid making a tough phone call by reorganizing your desk? That's what I mean. Let me overstructure here. So there's a lot of overstructuring. Some of you work for one, some of you are one, some of you are married to one, I don't know. There's the anal retention thing here. It's the bean counters that if you just count beans, you'd have no beans to count soon. But it's kind of the overstructure side of this thing. Too controlled is out of control, by the way. As a matter of fact, if I were sparring with you in karate, I'd love for you to become a micromanager. I'm going to get you upset. I'm going to get you focused on some tiny little thing, because then I can control you. If I can get you upset, I can get you to be overreactive. I can control you, and your kids know that. So does your dog. So anyway, so overstructure. There's too much structure, lack of flexibility. I'm trying to nail it down. I'm trying to control it out of a sense of insecurity, and there's too much structure on it. Now, upper left, who or what's that? High perspective, no control. That's your basic crazy maker. Here's an idea. Oh, here's another thing we can do. Oh, and one more. Let's do that. Oh, and here's another one. Absolutely no consciousness of constraints or resources. Right? Some of you are married to one, some of you work for one, some of you are one. One of the reasons a lot of people don't want to take a GTD class is because they're crazy makers that don't want to be a micromanager. They think this is about getting organized. Ooh, don't fence me in. Dude, look at all those lists. Ooh. Because they're afraid of that. Understand? I wouldn't want it either. There is an upper right quadrant, folks. Who or what's that? Mr. and Commander. You get Russell Crowe as our spokesperson, don't you think? They're eye on the prize, but they'll clean a toilet if required. They can shift their horizon absolutely where it needs to be. Come on, any of you ever worked for a boss, you haven't seen him for 2 weeks, and they walk in one day and walk over to the one thing that screwed up? Because they got it in their gut. Somehow that ability to walk that interesting line between structure and freedom, staying where I want to go, to be able to get there most elegantly. So how could I make sure? And come on, we fall off this. I do. I fall off regularly. Regularly, come on. Many times I find myself here. Many times I find myself here. Many times I find myself here because I was here and here. No, really. But the trick is, do you know how to recognize that you fell out and to bootstrap yourself back up to there? How do you do that? Well, that's why we created and we found these two models. One is just mastering workflow. That's usually the first thing people get when they get with GTD, is a way to get some sanity out of all this stuff. And how do I recognize the best practice about how to think, organize, clarify that stuff quick, fast, complete, without too much structure, but just enough so that I can know where things are in their place and I'm not losing anything. So that's the workflow piece, and there are 5 stages to that, which I'll go over briefly. And then the perspective piece says, okay, I need now to shift the horizons, and I need to be able to look at some other different levels of my work and commitment to make sure that those are clear. Different events here. And there's 6 horizons we found that seem to be functional for people to work with. Let me give you a sense of what I'm talking about. How many would say you have let reading material get somewhat out of control out there? If, you've got stuff to read and review just sort of strewed all over God and creation. It's all spread all over the place. Okay. If we said, okay, let's get control, one of us, Kelly or Wayne or one of our coaches, we'd walk in with you, tell you what, let's get yourself a box, let's get a labeler, let's label this thing, read and review, right? Let's go find what means read and review to you all around your environment. And we're just going to go find all the things that map to, you say, yeah, I want to read that. Oh, okay, I want to read that too. And we're going to put it in one big box. Big box. Big box. However, if we get it all in there, there's a part of you that will want to take us to lunch, buy us a bottle of champagne. Well, look, I'm in control. There's all my reading material. Wow, that's really cool. You're looking at a bunch of crap, but the rest of the world has no crap. Hey, if you put a fence around crap and label it, you're on. No. If you don't, it owns you. You got to name them, folks. If you don't name it, it owns you. You think we're kidding about a labeler? Don't kid yourself. Anyway, so now you got it under control, sort of. Say, okay, right. And then we say, okay, now let's go to the perspective side of the thing. Should we go through all that stuff and ask yourself, what should you be reading in there? How many of you are currently getting magazines that were something of interest to you 2 years ago, but the subscription hasn't stopped, but you haven't read those magazines, they just keep coming? Anybody got some of those? That's what I mean. Which subscriptions do you need to cancel right now, by the way, and which new magazines do you need to subscribe to? Now we're into perspective. So first of all, though, but if I walked in with a perspective conversation and said, hi, let's talk about what you should be reading and not, you go, so guess which order we do this in? You got to get control first. Now, the truth is, if you don't decide which magazines you really should be reading, it'll get out of control again. So these things are very closely tied together. If you lose perspective, you'll also lose control. And if you get out of control, it's impossible to have the right perspective. So there's a high correlation between these two events. If you are going to get control, and this is our 5 stages. If you read my book, this is chapter 2, and there it'll get to you. Actually, part 2 walks you through our coaching process. First thing you got to do is you have to collect anything that has potential meaning to you. That means, you need to grab all the would, could, should, need tos, might want us. That'd be cool. Oh, yeah, might want us. Anything that has life to it longer than the thought itself. Anything that doesn't belong permanently on your desk and in your desk represents something that needs to be done or changed or done something about. We grab all those things. So the first thing we do is just physically collect the environment, stuff that you still need to decide meaning about. If I go back to your desk right now, we'd look through your workstation. Anything that's not supplies, reference material, decoration, or equipment represents some commitment you've made to make something different, because those are the only 4 things that belong where they are the way they are. Everything else is in process. So we want to grab all the in-process stuff. Most people have no idea how many commitments they've made. And our first process is actually to start to identify what all of those are. Guess how long it takes us, typically, for the mid to senior level professionals that we coach with this material? Guess how long it takes just to have them, oh yeah, that reminds me. Guess how long it takes to get the complete dump out of their head? 1 to 6 hours. Had to take 16 hours for a guy one time. Finally, I just told him, yeah, you get the idea. A lot of stuff out there. Now, once you gather it all together, that's one thing. But then the next thing you got to do is you got to then clarify what those things mean. See, all kinds of people make all kinds of lists, but they don't clarify what they need to do about what's on that list. And unless you do that, that list will actually create a lot more fatigue. Most people don't want to look in their planners or their lists or their email because there's decisions about actions they have not made about it, and all it does is remind them that there are decisions they haven't made and how tired they are because they don't have the energy to think and decide. Most people's existential experience with their planners and their organizing tools is fatigue, simply because they don't clarify what's in there. You have anything that looks like a to-do list? 99% of every to-do list I've ever seen when I sat down to work with somebody is nothing but an incomplete list of still very unclear stuff. And by the way, every single email, every single thing in any one of your categories or your folders is either attracting or repulsing you psychologically every time you look at it. Sorry, there's no neutral territory. You're going, ooh, when can I mark that off? Or, get out of my face! Because they're still thinking about you. I haven't finished yet. Now, I'm not talking about any of you, but people you know. Once you process it, that email, I got to call Bill about that thing. Okay, now you've collected something, you've now processed it, call Bill, but if you don't call Bill right then, you better organize a reminder to call Bill, otherwise it crawls back up into your head again. And you better organize it in some place you trust you'll see at the right time when you have time and a phone. If you don't, your brain's still reminding you that you need to call Bill. Which then you must review all of that stuff. Once you've done that, you need to keep it alive and keep it current. You need to be using the system to keep your brain relaxed. See, I need to constantly be checking in with my system so I trust that it's current. Otherwise, my mind has to take that job back. I want my mind to be free, to be fully here, not there. But in order to do that, I have to care and feed the system. I have to keep coming back to it. I have to keep reviewing. I have to keep looking at the right thing at the right time. Then I engage. Then I make choices about what to do. So that's really how it is. But each one of these stages has its own best and its own worst practices. And we can drill into that in more detail if you guys want to hang around the next hour in terms of what that's about. Or just get my book. There's a sleazy sales pitch if you want. But well, I wrote it because nobody really written a manual about this stuff in that level of detail about it. And then, of course, the horizons of focus, we've identified at least 6 in there that you probably need to make sure these conversations are mature if you want to trust your priorities and trust your directions about all these things. You need to know what the ultimate intentionality is. Why are you on the planet? How are you doing? What are your core values? What's really, really, really important to you? But even if you have that clear, you better get clear about what the vision of you think that purpose being fulfilled out there. And by the way, I could be talking about your department or your company or your relationship. This iterates to anything. But if you look at it from you personally, what's the vision? That's the long-term thing. Okay, well, to fulfill that purpose, here's, it's one of the reasons you folks are at Google is there's some vision you've had about what you want to be doing and a little bit longer term in terms of career and lifestyle, for which this is probably a part of that. But then you need to bring that down to, 12 to 18 to 24 months. Okay, yeah, but in order to make that vision happen, here's where I want to be, here's what I want my job to do, here's what I want to accomplish over the next period of time, and that would be goals and objectives when you tend to look at it that way. And then you'll notice at 20,000 feet, you've got about 10 to 15 areas of focus and responsibility. Any of you find taking care of your body might be useful for your professional goals? A lot of you, too, I'm older than a lot of your parents, so you wait till you get to 62 and you discover you're not immortal. Any of you have any body projects or should? I always have something I'm fixing, taking out, putting in, I don't know, something going on. Relationships, spiritual life, service, a sense of creative expression. These are the areas of responsibility. In your job, staff development, what are the 4 or 5, 6 things you really need to be doing and maintaining? Sometimes you can spend a whole day just at 20,000 feet because that's where maintenance is. Keep the engine going. I need to maintain relationships. I need to maintain my house. I need to make sure the cat's fed and my 401k is appropriately invested. Stuff like that. All of which, by the way, will generate between 30 and 100 projects. Our definition of project is just something you want to finish. You can't finish. It's going to take more than one step to finish. You can finish within a few months. And most of you have 40, 50, 60, 70 of those if you include all your personal, which then comes down to about 150 to 220 next actions right now if you were to actually clarify your agreements and commitments with yourself at all these different levels appropriately. When we tend to coach people, by the way, we'll walk people through this, but guess which way we go? Do we go bottom up or top down? Bottom up. You go top down, nobody's home. If I ask any of you to write down top of mind right now, the top 3 things on your mind, very few of you would write fulfill destiny as human spirit on planet. What you're going to write is cat food. That's right. So if I want to work with you, we're going to start with cat food. At some point, you'll realize you have a cat because it fits into your vision, which is fulfilling your life purpose and, whatever. But we got to start with cat food. In 2 days of coaching intensely with people, we barely get up to 10,000 feet. We might get up to 20,000, might get to 30, because there is so much stuff down at that level that has got people out of control. They can't think at 40,000 feet yet. But that doesn't mean those are not conversations to have. It just means you didn't get to them yet. And we need to make sure you've got implementation and deck clearing capability first, because otherwise you'll resist taking on bigger stuff because you'll know you couldn't handle it if you did. The old models, why they don't work. They only dealt with one aspect. They either dealt with perspective or control, but they didn't tie them together. They also weren't complete. Hi, just organize the important things. Right. And then cat food will take half your day because of forgetting it and then having to go back. So a lot of times they tried to start top down and they didn't get all the way down, so it was incomplete. Or they said it's okay to only have a few of your phone calls on your calls list. Excuse me, as soon as you have anything left in your mind, you don't trust your system. If you don't trust your system, it's not worth the energy to put stuff into it because it's not giving you the payoff. You folks who've only got half of your stuff in terms of your commitments into Gmail and into however you're organizing that, sorry, it's just more work than it's worth. Do it all. Change the game. Totally changes the game. But you don't have a system until you do. They also compressed the models. They said, oh, any of you ever sit down and say, I need to get organized? And you tried to collect, tried to prioritize, tried to clarify, tried to organize, tried to review all in one fell swoop, and you blew a fuse. Go, doesn't work. So we've taken this down to as close to the zeros and ones as we could possibly get them in terms of you cannot get it any closer to just the simplest things to do. But you've got to collect. That's different than processing what you collect, which is different than organizing what you've processed, which is different than reviewing it all, which is different than making choices. Those are very different behaviors with different tools and different best practices. And we can't compress it any more than that. And everybody's tried to do that. Also, people have tried to compress the horizon. So let's talk priorities. You were right. Is that Google's strategic plan or yours? How about health and vitality? Where's that fit? You understand that people go, let's do part of it. And that won't work. If you try to compress priorities into anything less than at least these 6 different horizons, probably not going to get it all. Disconnected from reality, people want to deal with the vision of their life, and they got 3,000 emails blowing up on their desk. It just didn't map to where people really were psychologically. And they were system dependent. Hi, my system, my way to organize this is the best way to do it. If you folks get GTD, you'll see we are system agnostic. It doesn't matter. You want to write it on a body part? Fine. Doesn't matter. Just make sure you don't wash it off when you need it. Mine is like, what's the purpose of this? Clear my head. I call whatever system keeps my head clearest, that's what I'm going to use. That's the driver. How I came up with all this, I needed a better job. After 35 professions, by the time you're 35, consultant or flake are your only 2 options. I'm the laziest guy you ever met. I'll stand toe-to-toe with any of you on that one. I'm so lazy, I've set up a system so I only have to have a thought once. Somehow, I'm enthralled with efficient process. I thought everybody was. I wake up thinking, how much easier can I get done what I got to get done? I thought everybody thought that way. Apparently not. I value clear space. I discovered that, especially in the martial arts. A lot of that's about how do you clear the space, wherever that is. But a clear space is a much easier place to operate from. There's a surprise coming toward me right now. I can't see. So when I'm not doing anything else, my email's at 0, folks. If I'm cleaning backlog because there's a surprise coming toward me. You think it's easier to deal with surprise when you got 3,000 unprocessed emails or when you're at 0? You tell me. And by the way, it takes a lot less psychic energy to maintain at 0 than it does to maintain at 3,000. And if the good fairy, by the way, showed up and disappeared all your Gmails right now, you're at 0 and in. Within 10 days, you'd all have exactly the number you have. Because it has nothing to do with your volume. It has to do with your comfort zone of how many unprocessed things you will tolerate. Mine is 0. It's never at 0. There's always stuff coming in. But it's a lot easier to maintain at 0, and it's a lot easier to deal with surprise. Whole lot easier. With or go SGTD? I don't know. That's why you'll see question marks here. It's starting to become a standard. We are actually getting calls and emails. Could you tell us a GTD-compliant company that I can go to now? I'm sick and tired of where I work. It's the truth. It's starting to become. General Mills has now used this, SC Johnson now, these folks who are very much into the life balance stuff, and they really want to put their money where their mouth is about that. It's starting to become a standard. Call if you don't think this way, you don't start meetings without going, what are you trying to accomplish? You don't end discussions without going, what's the next step, yours or mine? And people are writing things down. It's not uncool. The world is coming at us. Just this, our kids need to know this. No kidding. So that's been on our someday maybe list, but it's warming up to be able to get to that. Work-life balance is a hoax. Just using that vocabulary is reinforcing something that's just bizarre. There's just what's next. And it's CAT or software or strategic plan. It's just that. And we've got to start to understand that's what the game is. And you folks seem to be doing that as a culture here. You kind of get that. You walk around, you sort of get that idea. Accepted, assumed practice. You know, at some point, hopefully, perhaps, our whole company will dissolve because everybody just does this. I don't know. We'll see. Looks like I just walk around and look at Inbask because I figure we got job security for a while.